Good evening, brand new day family. We're so excited that you have joined us this evening. We have an amazing guest for you. He is a doctor of physical therapy, he's an entrepreneur, he's an author. The list goes on and on. Let's welcome to the brand new day family, Dr. Ivan Hernandez.
Hello, 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 hello. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I know I just shared with the listening audience a little bit about who you are, but if you could please tell our listening audience your just a little bit about your story.
Um, I've been practicing for 20 years now. I've been practicing physical therapy for 20 years. Um, I I treat primarily within the orthopedic and sports realm. And I treat the continuum. So a lot of times people tend to think that physical therapy is rehabilitating a knee. And while that is primarily the case, the fundamental principles that apply along the exercise continuum into wellness, athletic enhancement, even weight loss are the same principles. So what I do day to day is I work with clients across the continuum of exercise, from remediating a knee injury all the way to improving someone's athletic abilities. I work with weight loss patients. I work in a variety of different settings. I work as a powerlifting coach as well. So I cover the gamut, really, when it comes to managing pain and enhancing someone's athletic abilities. Hello?
Deanne?
Yes, so I have a question. My name is Deanne Lax. I am the co-host of Brand New Day with Emily. And what inspired you to do the work that you do in the wellness industry? I mean, I know we all have
That's a
well. So what was your
Yeah.
inspiration?
So no, that's a good question. So I like to start off by saying that there are a lot of staggering stats. And I think sometimes when you start off with a stat, it kind of contextualizes the why. When you look at survivability, what are the leading causes of death, and what are the things that compromise survivability, and what are the things that lead to more morbidity, disease? Um, Currently, worldwide, 7 out of 10 non-communicable diseases, 7 out of 10 leading causes of death, I'm sorry, are non-communicable diseases. And what that means is that these are things that are based on lifestyle choices. Are are people exercising enough? Are people eating right? Are people sleeping right? And when you look at each of these main categories in terms of the things that we could do to preserve our health and prevent disease and extend our lifespan, we're doing a lot of things wrong. 80% of people in the country right now are getting less than the recommended amount of exercise. So anywhere between 75 and 150 minutes per week. Estimates indicate that 80% of the US population are not getting enough. When you look at sleep, for example, it's not a sexy topic, but it's huge in terms of weight management, in terms of injury prevention, in terms of optimal hormonal health, in terms of managing pain. 70% of the population are getting less than 7 hours of sleep. That's huge. Right now, 70% of the US population are overweight, and a third of those people are morbidly obese. So the numbers are staggering. And so when I look at those numbers, they reflect my why. Why am I so heavily invested in managing pain? Why am I so heavily invested in helping people have a better experience? Because the numbers clearly indicate that we're doing a lot of things wrong. When you look at pain, for example, that's another thing that I'm invested in terms of applying my time and my efforts into helping people. 100 million people in the United States, right? So essentially 1 out of 3 people would report some type of persistent or chronic pain, which is qualified as having pain for more than 3 months. So this is my why. This is why I'm so adamant about what I do. I'm very passionate about helping people because it's a big problem. Yes, we're living longer, but the quality of life that we're having is compromised because of all of these preventable, non-communicable diseases. And being a country with many resources, you would think we would do better, but we're not. And this is why I'm so passionate about what I do.
It's definitely difficult to not only watch our parents struggle with illnesses as we get older. It's difficult for us to endure, like to be told, especially at this time where we're limited in our options for going to the gym and things like that. Like we're dealing with our own health issues, trying to just make it through this coronavirus and trying to deal with being in the house 85 to 90% of the time. And if we have kids, trying to deal with those stresses. And I think what you do is commendable because right now, I mean, typically like a person, even like me, my health issue, I've never really had a lot of health issues, but since we've been going through what we've been going through, things have been popping up. So I'm like, now you're finding more and more people dealing with symptoms.
It's very interesting. That is not unusual. And, the term that's being used within the scientific and medical communities is called allostatic load. And essentially what that is chronic and perpetual stress. And of any kind. And when we have chronic and perpetual stress, it starts to alter our blood chemistry. It starts to alter our physiology. And as a consequence, it exposes us or puts us at risk for a number of maladies. So, not only will it affect, our blood pressure, it'll affect our ability to sleep, but it's a precursor to anxiety and depression. And when you look at a lot of disease, certainly my realm is musculoskeletal disease, but when you look at a lot of diseases and when you look at things that we don't call a disease, we call a syndrome, where it's an unknown etiology, an unknown cause. And we apply that term syndrome in the Western world. What we're learning through research is that a lot of that is your body's way of somaticizing cumulative and perpetual stress. And it does it in a variety of ways. When I wrote my book, Courage to Continue, I detail what happened to me. I live a fairly healthy life. I eat healthily. I thought I did everything right. I thought I was the pillar of health. And it was because of this chronic and perpetual stress that eventually led to me having a heart attack. And that's when I decided to write about it. So a lot of these maladies that are happening, back pain, headaches, fibromyalgia, restless leg syndrome, irritable bowel syndrome, even autoimmune diseases, right? All of these things, oftentimes, again, in the Western world, we chalk them up to syndromes, unknown causes. But what we're learning and what research is showing is that it's not unknown. It's when the body is out of whack. And so what's the answer? The answer is engaging in self-care, eating well, sleeping well, removing toxicity of all sorts. That includes people. So a lot of it is self-care and lowering cortisol levels. I can't emphasize how important that is. So whether it's yoga, Pilates, going for a jog, watching a comedy on TV, we need to lower our cortisol levels because that's what's killing us, among other things.
Amen. I feel it.
Yeah.
Our sleep is, Thank you. I can end it right now because, like, you just like you giving me, you diagnosed me and you told me what to do. So yes, but go ahead, Emily.
I can relate too because I went to the doctor recently, and my blood pressure has been off the chart. And I realized with being also being a teacher that that anxiety level is a lot higher, so the stress levels go up. But I also, like you said, with the cortisol, I have to be careful because my mother almost 3 years ago passed away due to pancreatic cancer. So I'm very mindful of, and she had Cushing syndrome. So I need to make sure that I keep those cortisol levels where they need to be. So thank you so much for that information. And as you know, we've been talking all month about healthy, wealthy you, and you've stepped into what the question I wanted to ask you. What are some practical ways that we can achieve optimal wellness, not just the physical?
Yeah. So what we're learning, and if I'm gonna answer you, but I want to just give a preface first. What we're learning is that in within the scientific and medical communities is that disease is not linear related to one cause. That model is a reductionist model. We call it a biomedical model. And what we're realizing is that a lot of disease is a manifestation of multiple factors. And so this new model, or this re-emerging model, is becoming prominent, and it's referred to as a biopsychosocial model. And essentially what it means is that when we have disease, there are a lot of things that we have to take into account. Of course, the tissue or the system, but we also have to take into account the person's psyche, their social network. All of these things collectively influence our health. So when it comes to identifying the pillars of health, we have to take into account not just the physical, but the psychological and the social. And so in my book, Courage to Continue, the 5 pillars that I talk about are getting good sleep. Don't sleep on sleep. A lot of people, we have that culture where sleep is the cousin of death. Sleep is for the lazy. Studies show over and over, there's robust data to indicate that sleep is influenced in pretty much every system in the body. And without getting adequate sleep, those things become compromised. And the risk for disease increases. So don't sleep on sleep. Exercise. Now, when it comes to exercise, people often think going to a gym, right? And definitely that does apply, but you want to think of movement and exercise as kind of 2 distinct things. So you want to have a dedicated, say, hour of going to the gym or doing something, but you also want to be active throughout the course of the day. So you're and there's an acronym, it's called NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And you want that to be up, especially with weight management. So if you go into the gym for an hour, I don't want you to sit for 10 hours and think you're doing justice. You got to get up and you got to get moving. You got to park your car a little farther away. You got to take the stairs. You got to do all these things. That's important. And in addition to that, become out of breath. It's okay to be a little uncomfortable. I think, a lot of, we're ancient bodies in modern times. And what I mean by that is that it's okay to be a little uncomfortable. The modern times has us very comfortable and cozy, and we don't stress our bodies enough to make them resilient. And you got to think of exercise as controlled stress. That stress makes us resilient throughout our body, multiple systems, not just the musculoskeletal system. So sleep, exercise, moving more, stressing less. That's a big thing that I talk about in the book. Stress is big because it somaticizes in a lot of ways. One of my inspirations when I was writing my book was a book by Dr. Robert Sapolsky. It's called Why Don't Zebras Get Ulcers? And essentially what he's saying is that, in the wild, animals get stressed when they're the prey or when they're the predator, when survival, when life and death is at stake. But humans, because of our ability to ruminate about the past, about we perseverating about what may happen in the future, and our ability to escape the now, our primary source of stress is happening within our head, our imagination. And that creates tremendous turmoil in our bodies. So stressing less, and there are so many ways. There's no single modality that is a panacea. If you like to deep breathe, then deep breathe. If you like yoga, then do yoga. If you like going for a walk or laughing or whatever it is, spending time with a loved one, do those things. Do the things that reduce stress. If you're fortunate to have a partner, a spouse, do those things. Spend time with them, laugh. All of these things reduce stress. If it's taking a warm bath with candles and listening to jazz music or whatever it is, neo soul, do your thing. That's what I do. And then think positively. I know it sounds hokey pokey. I know it does. Because when I was writing about it and when I talk about it, it sounds like, oh, think positively. But it's true, because one of the things that I say is that, life inherently will have vicissitudes. We will have challenges and adversities. It's just part and parcel with life. And we have to, if we recognize that, we're more likely when faced with a challenge to understand what it is, to contextualize it, say, listen, it's not because I have bad luck, or this is part of life. And so just thinking positive is a strong way, and just contextualizing those negative experiences is a great way of having the ability to overcome them. And so those are the pillars that I talk about in my book, very pragmatic takeaways that people could use in order to improve their bio, their psycho, and their social.
Yeah.
I think I hit all 5, right? Eat well, sleep. Oh, and eating well. I didn't mention that. Eating well. So you want to exercise, you want to sleep, you want to stress less, think positive, and you want to eat well. And I'll just quickly talk about eating well. There's no panacea when it comes to diet. When you think of obesity and weight gain, look, we could talk about that alone for an hour, but if I had to truncate it, I'll say that the biggest problem that we have is overconsumption. And one of the reasons why we have overconsumption is because a lot of processed foods pack a lot of calories. So if we kind of stick to whole foods, foods that have 4 or less ingredients, we're more bound to eat foods that are going to be more filling, more satiating. And that is the big thing. So I'm not a zealot of Atkins or keto, a keto diet, but I am a big proponent, especially with weight loss, of increasing protein, because protein does several things. It's satiating, so it fills us up. It makes us feel content. It makes the body work a little harder. So metabolically, the body has to work harder to metabolize protein as opposed to a carbohydrate. And then the third thing, and probably one of the more important things when it comes to weight loss, is that protein preserves muscle mass. There are 2 signals that help to preserve muscle mass: resistance training and protein. And protein does a really good job doing that. And when we're looking to weight loss, when we're looking to aim for weight loss, which again, it's 2/3 of the country should be thinking about weight management. Maintaining muscle is very important, because the more muscle mass we keep, the higher our metabolism, the more we'll be able to preserve our metabolism, because metabolism has more to do with body mass than it has to do with composition, muscle versus fat. It has to do with total mass. So if we could keep our total mass by keeping on muscle, we're going to do a better job staying energetic and keeping off or keeping a high metabolism.
And so with that being said,
yeah. No, you said it. what I want to emphasize for the listeners who may have the objective of losing weight or maintaining weight is you have to find a diet that works for you. The person that achieves success with a diet is the person that is going to adhere to the diet. That's probably the most important thing, adherence. So veganism may not work for you, but it may work for the next person. Intermittent fasting may work for that person, but not you. So you have to find the thing that you're going to be able to stick with that's pragmatic for your life, and most likely that's going to work. But you can't deny eating whole foods, sticking to the perimeter of the supermarket. I always tell my patients that, all the garbage is in the middle aisles, but the whole foods tends to be on the perimeter, stick to the perimeter, and, stay active, count your steps. That's another thing I forgot to mention. I'm a big proponent of steps.
Yes, I do that every day. I do it every day.
Yeah.
But the other question I wanted to ask you is because we want to make sure that we're addressing the men who are listening to us. And, what are some, because, unfortunately, some men, they don't like the doctor. They don't want to know. They want to stay in the dark. What are some things that you can help?
That's such a good question. I started a podcast about, 3 months ago now. And so my fellow co-host and I always have this conversation about, apathy and ignorance are being the sources of bliss, because when you don't know, then you're not going to be stressed out with what you do know. And when it comes to health, that's not the approach, because, forgive me for saying all these adages, but it's so relevant. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's so much easier to go to the doctor and get screened on a regular basis and prevent something or identify something when it's brewing, then get to the point where now you're dealing with disease. A lot of critics or those that are cynical about our current healthcare system would say we don't have a healthcare system. We have more of a disease care system, because we deal with things after the fact, not from a preventative standpoint. So there's a lot of things. There's cultural things. Men tend to have egos or not want to know. And so we have to have a paradigm shift with the way we see medicine. And we have to there's a lot of stigmas. I think a big one, not only are men having this avoidance or apprehension with going to the doctor on a regular basis, but a big one that I see is mental health. There's this stigma, particularly with Black and brown populations. We tend to have this stigma that going to the doctor when you're stressed or anxious or have something else is considered being crazy, but it's not. It's actually very normal, very common. It's the crux of my book. It's the crux of that book I mentioned, Why Don't Zebras Get Ulcers? My book being Courage to Continue. So we have to slowly destigmatize these issues, particularly with certain demographics, because it's hurting those people. We have to say it's okay to go to the doctor. It's okay to know. It's okay, it's part of life. It's part of life's journey. But when we deny it, when we stigmatize it, we tend to become fearful, avoidant, apprehensive, and then it gets to a point where it's a bit too little too late, and now we're dealing with a full-blown disease. So a lot of it is conversation, revelation through conversation, talking to people, talking to men, talking to certain demographics, and saying, hey, you got to stay on top of your health. It's important. Don't feel ashamed. If you got to get a colonoscopy, or if you have to get a mental health screen, or if you're a little overweight, or if you have erectile disorder, like you got to talk to your doctor about these things, because then it could get worse. All these things are signs and symptoms of oftentimes of something brewing.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Ivan, we wanted to ask you, if you could just tell our listening audience where they can find you and follow you online as well as social media.
Okay, so let's see. On Facebook, I have a page called Dr. Ivan.
Mm-hmm.
On Instagram, my tag is Dr. Ivan. On Twitter, I think, across all platforms, my handle is Dr. Ivan PT. Dr. Ivan PT. Okay. So dr.ivanpt. My website is executiveparkpt.com for those that live locally and would like to make an appointment with me. And then when I wrote my book, I went on a book tour, and so I sell my book, and I also sell a pain cream. That's a whole other conversation. I could talk literally hours about pain because it's such a big problem. But in efforts to combat the opioid epidemic, I formulated with a chemist a pain balm. It's called Magnificent. And Magnificent is magnesium sulfate, and I have a proprietary blend of botanicals in the balm, and I use it with my patients, and I sell it through my website and also my office. The name of that website is livelongerwellness.com. Okay. So I have two websites, livelongerwellness.com and also executiveparkpt.com, which is my office.
All right. Awesome.
Dr. Ivan, thank you so much.
And what's the podcast name?
Yes.
So the podcast name, I didn't get too creative. It's actually called Courage to Continue, From Tests to Testimonials. And my objective with the show really is twofold, is for guests to come on and share their experience with a particular adversity that they dealt with. And what I noticed in writing my own book and sharing my adversity is that it was very cathartic. It was very therapeutic to share my story. But on the flip side of that, when other people hear similar stories, they tend to feel not isolated. They start to realize that these things are part of the human experience, that they're not alone, that they're in large company with dealing with adversity. And that's what I try to do in my book, is shared all the adversities that I dealt with. And look, I'm still here. I'm alive talking to you guys.
Yeah. Absolutely. Dr. Ivan, you are now officially a part of the Brand New Day family. So we thank you for being here, and we would love for you to come back whenever we ask you. So feel free whenever you have a new book coming out or whatever. If you just want to have something you want to share, just hit us up and we will put you on.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.